The desert was silent, yet alive with whispers that only a rare soul could understand. Beneath the vast dome of stars, a lone rider sat still upon the dunes, his falcon perched beside him, both listening to something unseen. It was not the voice of the world that reached him, it was the quiet breath of destiny. Sheikh Hamdan, known to the world as Fazza, had learned from childhood that the wind carried more than sand. It carried secrets, memories, and echoes of hearts that once loved and lost beneath the same sky. And so, he listened, not to command, but to understand. There was something sacred about the way the wind moved through Dubai's golden plains, tracing invisible patterns that seemed to speak of time and eternity. Fazza had often said that the wind was his oldest companion, the only one who knew both his silence and his fire. To the world, he was a prince, a leader, a poet, but to the wind, he was simply a man searching for his truest self. When the palace slept and the city lights dimmed, he would ride out into the open, let the desert breathe around him, and ask the wind questions no one else could hear. The wind did not always answer in words. Sometimes it replied through the rustling of palm leaves, the distant call of a falcon, or the hush that followed a sunset. Fazza believed that to hear the truth, one must first empty oneself of noise. He had seen people rush through life, chasing titles, wealth, and applause, but never pausing to listen, to the wind, to the heart, to the soul within. That was where he found his difference, his quiet rebellion. The poet in him did not crave fame. He sought connection, to the divine rhythm that wove life and loss into a single song. As the son of Dubai's ruler, his world was one of responsibility and grandeur, yet he never let the weight of royalty silence the call of simplicity. While others found meaning in luxury, he found it in the soft footprints of camels crossing the sand, in the eyes of a horse that trusted him without words, in the whisper of the wind that carried messages from unseen realms. Those moments became his verses, untamed, wild, born from solitude rather than spectacle. Sometimes, people saw his strength and mistook it for ease. They did not know of the storms he carried within. To lead with both courage and compassion was not inherited, it was earned. There were nights when he sat under the endless stars, his mind wrestling between duty and dream, between the prince and the poet. The wind, always faithful, would wrap around him like an unseen friend, reminding him that greatness is not about power, but peace. He wrote poetry not to impress, but to release. His words were mirrors, reflecting pain, hope, and a love too deep for the world's shallow understanding. Every verse was a fragment of his hidden soul, a trace of something eternal that refused to fade. His poems spoke of the desert's silence, of love that transcends form, of a divine presence felt in every grain of sand. And when his verses reached others, they felt it too, the truth that beauty is not in perfection, but in presence. The people loved him because he was not distant. He walked among them with humility, his smile carrying the warmth of a man who understood life's fleeting nature. In a world where noise defined fame, he became an icon of stillness. They saw his horses gallop across the dunes, his falcons soar through the sky, his words pierce hearts like gentle lightning, and they realized this was no ordinary prince. This was a soul that listened before speaking, that felt before judging. But even legends have moments of loneliness. Fazza often gazed into the horizon, wondering if the wind carried the voice of someone he once loved. There were whispers in his poems, of a presence felt but unseen, of a name he never spoke aloud. The desert, loyal and silent, guarded that secret like a shrine. Perhaps it was not a person he missed, but a part of himself that love had awakened and life had buried. The wind reminded him that everything beautiful must remain untamed. Just as the dunes shift and reshape yet remain eternal, so must the heart evolve without losing its depth. Fazza's hidden soul thrived not in control, but surrender. He learned that love, art, and faith all come alive when one stops. There were nights when the moon hung low, silvering the dunes in sacred light, and Fazza would stand at the highest crest, his silhouette carved against eternity. The wind wrapped around him like an old friend returning with forgotten stories. It carried the scent of rain from distant lands, the echo of prayers whispered by travelers long gone. In that vastness, Fazza felt both infinite and invisible, a reminder that even princes are but dust shaped by divine breath. His heart would quiet, and he would murmur verses not meant for anyone to hear, lines that dissolved into the wind before reaching the earth, as if poetry itself was his secret form of prayer. Sometimes the wind answered not with comfort but with challenge. It roared through the dunes as if testing the strength of his spirit. Fazza had learned that nature does not flatter, it reveals. The storms that swept through the desert were mirrors of his inner trials, moments when his purpose blurred, when leadership weighed heavy on his chest. But he never ran from the storm, he rode through it. The poet in him knew that a soul must break to bloom. Each gust of sand against his face reminded him that the wind's fury was also its way of teaching resilience. Pain, he realized, was simply the desert's way of sculpting truth. As dawn returned, painting the sky in soft amber and rose, Fazza would gaze upon the first light and smile at its gentleness. He saw in that light the promise of renewal, the eternal rhythm of endings and beginnings. The horses stirred, the falcons spread their wings, and for a moment the whole desert seemed to bow to the day's birth. It was then that Fazza felt a sacred stillness inside him, the kind that cannot be taught or inherited. He had become one with the silence he once sought. In the hush between the wind's breaths, he could hear the divine pulse of life itself. That was where his hidden soul lived, between sound and silence, duty and dream, mortal and eternal. In those quiet dawns, he also thought of love, not the fleeting kind sung in shallow verses, but the kind that transcends time and body. There had been someone once, a presence that left no trace yet filled every corner of his being. She existed